Hello, everybody. Welcome to Ask the Expert, where we ask industry leaders about their unique perspective on how to navigate the most difficult challenges faced by the broader real estate and financial services ecosystem. And it's also to give you a chance to ask the expert some of the most pressing questions on your mind. My name is Lindsay Euler, and I'm the VP of Customer Success at DOMA. And today I'm very excited to welcome Phil Treadwell, National Director, Sales Innovation and Strategy for Thrive Mortgage, to talk to us today about the importance of building a personal brand. A couple of things before we begin. If you have a question for Phil, we'll be taking those after our first 15 to 20 minutes of discussion. So all your questions can be submitted via the Q&A text link at the bottom of your webinar window. This webinar is also being recorded and will be available on our DOMA website afterward. Additionally, if you'd like to suggest future topics or interviewees for this program, you can reach out to us at events@doma.com. So with that, let's dive in. Welcome, Phil.
Thank you for having me, Lindsay. I'm very excited about this. That's been in the works for a little bit, and I appreciate you having me on.
Yes, we're so thrilled to have you here today. So as we dive in here, you've been in the mortgage space in a variety of different roles, if you will. So we'd love to hear more about your background.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, no, it's been about 17 years in the industry. Started off kind of getting thrown at the deep end of the pool as an originator. I tell the story that I answered a newspaper ad where they're looking for someone that had sales and management experience. I had both. Come to find out it was a mortgage company. And the guy who interviewed me was one of the two owners of the company. And he said, "Hey, I think you could really do this." A 30-minute interview turned into about a 3-hour conversation. And he said, if you decide to do this, you're going to look back at this conversation one day and cuss me, because once you get in the mortgage industry, it's really, really tough to get out of it. So I've looked back at that conversation a few times and cussed him a little bit. But I started off as an originator, had a few days of classroom style training, learned really the good fundamental core of the mortgage business in the early 2000s, and did that for a few years, became a branch manager, was still producing, then eventually went on to be a area manager, a regional manager, all those types of things, into a national director position with Thrive, still very involved in sales and production and things like that. So I've gotten to wear a lot of different hats when it comes to production and sales within the mortgage industry, for sure.
That's awesome. Given that you've worn a lot of different hats, and also your passion for personal branding, would love to understand, what does that mean, and to you specifically, and why does it matter in this industry?
That's a great question. So my kind of journey on a personal brand, if you will, started really about 5 years ago. I was an area manager, regional manager, and covered most of Missouri, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Kansas, that center part of the country. When I got into markets outside of where I'd personally produced or had branches, my effectiveness went way down because they didn't know who I was. They'd never heard of my company. I was working for a company based here in Dallas that didn't have a lot of name recognition at the time. And I realized very quickly I needed some way to gain some credibility. So at the time, I started doing some blogging, some content marketing online. That very quickly turned to social media. I saw this guy named Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary V, for those that know who he is. He was talking about social media and how that's how we're consuming content, and that's where attention was. And so I started creating content online, and my focus was other mortgage professionals, people that I wanted to network with, that I potentially wanted to recruit. And through me offering advice and helping them build their business, that was really how I created a brand, if you will. And so that very quickly turned into an opportunity to start a podcast. What happened was I started an Instagram page. I called it Mortgage Marketing Expert, mainly because I only owned the domain name. And we were trying to just offer up tips to help people build their business. Within about 30 days, we had about 1,000 people following the page. And within 90 days, I realized there's only so many one-liners you can come up with before you start repeating things. And I realized we needed a new source of content. So I started the podcast to bring on experts, mortgage marketing experts in the industry, to interview them and share their tips, with our folks on social media. The podcast really blew up. And what I realized was that the value in creating a relationship with people is the the value of helping them, right? If the Zig Ziglar, if you help enough other people get what they want, you end up getting what you want. And so that was really how I created a brand, was by associating with people that had a lot to say. I didn't have to come up with my own content. And the biggest challenge that I think most people struggle with when it comes to a personal brand is they think it needs to be a brand. And you need to focus on the person, right? A personal brand is about the person and not the brand. Don't worry about a logo or a tagline or a shtick or whatever else. It needs to be about you, right? Find things that you like to do for fun that, you don't necessarily, a lot of people don't want to talk about their family or their private life. You don't have to, but talk about hobbies, right? You can see in here, I have a couple of guitars here. I've owned craft beer breweries. I travel a lot. I talk about my family. That's relatable. That's what people really want to know about. Now, whenever I share other types of mortgage content, people are still following my content because I'm not just being a commercial. I'm not just trying to be spammy. So that's really the importance of a personal brand, is your credibility matters, but not in a sense of, if you just talk about business or try to label yourself as an expert, sometimes that comes across as showy and disingenuous, and you kind of lose some of that authenticity.
Yeah, so that's really important, and it leads to my next question, which is, you do talk a lot about the balance between trust and attention. So how do you showcase that authenticity while building trust and also grabbing people's attention?
For sure. That's one of the things that's on my website that I've talked about for several years, is that effective marketing is that balance of trust and attention. And I use the example, I could light myself on fire and put it on TikTok and probably get a lot of attention, but I've not created any trust that people want to do business with me. At the same time, we have a lot of people who are super trusted in their communities, but not a lot of people know who they are. So they're capped in the amount of business that you do. So you have to have both. Now, the way to do that, trust in and of itself, is also just being authentic and being relatable. So when I did my podcast with Gary Vee and I asked him about this concept, he literally said, it's not as much about trust as it is relevance. So that's really been my word for the last few years. And the way I kind of frame it up for people is, we inherently are drawn to and trust people that are like us. Doesn't mean we don't trust people that aren't like us, but we biologically trust people that are similar. And the example that I use is years ago, whenever we were in Europe, it was 4th of July and we were in Italy, and we saw the Americans. We're like, oh, hey, high five, we're from the US, but I don't do that in the US unless living in Texas, I'm in Florida, and you see someone else from Texas. Oh, hey, high five, we're also from Texas. But I don't do that when I'm in Texas unless I live in Dallas. I'm in Houston. Oh, hey, five, I'm in Dallas. So you get the idea. We inherently trust and are drawn to people that are from similar situations. It's the same reason when you meet someone new, you talk about the weather. It's the one thing you for sure have in common with that person at that point in time. And we typically trust people until they give us a reason not to. And in marketing, it's very important, because as soon as you say something that seems disingenuous, or you seem like you have an ulterior motive, that's when that trust immediately goes away. So as you gain someone's attention, you have to do it with something that they find valuable. If it's business content, make it about them, right? Tell stories about the culture of your company. Tell stories about clients you work with. Tell stories about the individual people. Hey, did you know that this person over here that works for our company has a unicycle, right? I'd watch him ride a unicycle through the office. That's kind of entertaining, right? So if you share that kind of content, you indirectly talk about your business and your culture without making a spammy video that says culture is important to us and here's why. Nobody cares about that. So you have to get their attention with something that they find valuable, which can be entertaining, educational, informative, whatever that is. And you earn the trust by being real, by being authentic, by not trying to be someone that you're not or that they don't want to be. Now, there's this expression, your vibe attracts your tribe. Go be who you are, and you'll attract the people that philosophically think the same way you do. And it's just like we've all had those friendships or even romantic relationships that it's all it is work, and it's never very fulfilling because you just have to work at it all the time. Well, don't do that. Don't do that in business. If it takes, if you try to partner with someone that is wildly different than you, it's not that you couldn't successfully do business, but most of the time it's just a lot of work and there's not a lot of payoff in that. So that's a probably more an in-depth answer than you're looking for. But these concepts are super important. When people wrap their mind around it, it makes all the other stuff that we do very, very simple.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. I think it gives everybody a bit of a North Star as they're starting to figure out what that personal brand is and how they show their authenticity, which actually leads to my next question is how do you recommend, loan officers in particular as they're getting started in sort of building out this personal brand? What are some of those first steps you recommend?
Yeah, I mean, the first step is you have to understand kind of what the basic marketing formula is, right? You have to understand, number one, who is your target market? Who's your audience? The second thing is what value or message are you wanting to deliver that audience? And then the third step is understanding what is the best platform or medium to deliver that message to that audience. And again, with podcasting, my audience was mortgage professionals. The value and message I want to give them were tips to help them make more money and build their business. And the medium I chose was podcasting because most mortgage professionals are busy people and they could listen in the car, at the gym, while they're at the office. And not a lot of people I knew were watching a lot of long form video content at that time. You have to remember this was, 3.5 years ago. There wasn't a ton of podcasts. So I wasn't really sure whether people would listen at all, but that's the medium that I chose. So when you think about whoever your audience is, if you're, let's say you're targeting first-time home buyers or a younger generation, Facebook probably wouldn't be my first option because that's typically aging up, right? You don't have a lot of young people. Like TikTok and Instagram are probably your first two choices from a social media perspective. The next thing you want to do is make sure whatever type of content you're creating, and keep in mind, there's really only three types of content. There's video, there's audio, and there's written. And most of us are drawn to one of those three and what we like to consume. And I tell people what you like to consume is probably what you're going to like to share. So pick one and then pick a platform or two and just focus on that. Don't try to go to 5 or 6 different social media channels or platforms. Just keep it simple. And the last thing I'll say, especially for people that are getting started, don't worry about trying to create content. Gary Vee, I reference him a lot because he has a lot of good things to say, but he says, document, don't create. And it's a super simple formula. Just document your life, who you are, what you do, document your business. You don't have that when you're just documenting and you're just sharing, it removes this ability to sell, right? Because you shouldn't be selling. Marketing is about attention. Sales makes them a customer. You're not ready to make them a customer because you don't have their attention yet. So many people think they're marketing and sharing when really they're just selling, and people will shut off almost immediately. So don't do that. Just share who you are and share other people's content. You can be a great curator of other people's content. You can look at your guys' website with a lot of great webinars. You can look at different industry websites and resources. You can find other people's videos or posts and share that. People will follow you and pay attention to your content because you're a great resource of sharing other people's content. You don't have to create it all yourself. And if you want to, great. Go watch a Tom Ferry video, understand the concept, and record a video saying, hey, I just watched this video about Tom Ferry. Here's what he was talking about to help realtors build their business. Great. You gave credit to the person that gave you the idea, but you still created a video in and of yourself. So those are the first few things that I would think for people that are starting that. Make it about the other people. And I know that sounds counterintuitive, but a personal brand isn't about the brand. It's about the person. And if that person is focusing on helping other people, you'll create all the attention that you want.
Yep, I think it's great. I love that. I love the idea of curation. We should all become just human Pinterest boards.
Absolutely.
So when we think about all these different channels, how do we measure success? How do we know if these channels are successful?
That's a great question. So at the end of the day, that's a very arbitrary, there's different metrics that can be very arbitrary. A lot of people get really excited when they've created a lead. Oh my gosh, someone saw my Facebook post or saw my Instagram video or story, and they called me, and now I've gotten a lead from it. That's great, but that isn't a closed transaction, right? Most everybody that's listening is a mortgage or real estate professional, and even in title, unless a deal closes, you typically don't make any money. So our whole goal is to help people achieve the dream of home ownership, help do closed transactions. So The success metric is production, helping people, getting people into homes. When it comes to the marketing, I don't know that I would tell people to really check much results. And really the results you want is the reach. Don't look at likes, don't look at comments. Those are helpful. If you're getting a bunch of like and comments, that's validating that maybe that struck a chord, and those likes and comments are going to help reach more people. But the algorithm does take into consideration people looking at those posts, watching those videos, and will still share them even if they're not getting a lot of likes and comments, because sometimes people will get so caught up in the content, they forget to go like. And if you think about written articles specifically, I might click on an article and go read that whole article, and I'll be super enthralled with it, but never actually go back and like or comment. So the point in all of that is just be looking at the reach, right? Especially if you're looking at some of the analytics, if you have a professional or creator Instagram page instead of personal, if you have a professional Facebook page, it'll show impressions and reach. Focus more on that than you do the engagement at this point in time, because you just want a ton of content out there. And that's why I say don't overanalyze it. It was probably 50. We got about 120 episodes on our podcast. We were in 50 episodes before we really paid attention to how much, what type or theme of content. We just put everything out there and didn't really judge it at all. You've got to have a bunch of content out there before you can start fine tuning too much. But get friends, get coworkers, get trusted people's feedback and say, what do you think about this? But it's important not to prejudge, because a lot of times content that I think is going to land, oh my gosh, they're just going to love that, falls flat. And there's time my wife, who's also my business partner, she'll be like, oh, this is great. And I'm like, I didn't really think about that. So things are going to hit differently with different people. So the short version is don't prejudge it a lot. Make sure you're getting some reach for your content, and then just go put a bunch of it out there.
Okay, that's great advice. And since you've worked with a lot of loan officers and folks along their journey, have you seen any personal branding make a significant difference for a loan officer in particular?
100%. Well, I know of a few off the top of my head. One of my previous loan officers, their family adopted kids and had foster kids and was very involved in nonprofits. And so he created a podcast. Specifically, all they did was showcase nonprofits, churches, ministries, charities in his market, and just went and interviewed them and just shared their cause, what they're doing. There was no hook or sales element to it. And his business absolutely exploded because he was doing a good thing for the community, and he got an opportunity to meet a ton of people. On a national scale, Neil Dingra, his Instagram handle is Neil Home, Neel Home. He puts out a ton of really, really high quality content, and he has gone from, and he's very, I'm not giving away his personal information, he shares this publicly, went from a few $100,000 a year to into the millions a year in income because his business grew through putting out content that was success driven, entrepreneurship, helping people create wealth through real estate, a lot of content that way. And then the last example I'd probably use, excuse me, is Alec Hansen. Alec Hansen's on the West Coast. A couple of years ago, he decided he was going to do 100 videos in 100 days. And I specifically found out about him because he'd done a video about the fact that I'd got the opportunity to have Gary Vee on my podcast. And I started watching his content, and it was these really entertaining videos. He found an app called Vlog Easy, Vlog Easy, that you could insert like some video clips and some things in there as transition. And fast forward a few years, he does a ton of video content. He's written a book that was an Amazon bestseller. He has a podcast. He has a huge team, all because he focused initially on that consistency piece. He just said, every day for 100 days, I'm going to put out a video. Now, is it realistic for everybody to be able to put a video out every day for 100 days? Maybe, maybe not. Our company just did one where we had a challenge to do a video every day for 30 days for the month of July, or actually maybe in the month of August. But anyway, it is possible to do. But one of the ways you should do it and think about it is don't be afraid to batch content. It's something that I do a lot. And what I mean by that is if you have a couple of hours and you can record 4 or 5 or 6 videos, go ahead and record them all right then. Do a couple of different shirts or outfits, or, put your hair up or down or whatever. So in those situations, don't be afraid to look at that and say, hey, I have time to get it done now. I may not have time tomorrow. Sometimes being consistent is understanding that consistency is difficult and finding workarounds for yourself in those moments. So those are super important to be thinking about. Is a personal brand can change the face of your business. But I throw that first example in because it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be about business. It very much can be something about your community, something about a hobby. There's another example of a guy, I think he's in Washington or Oregon. He likes to play adult softball and started a podcast about co-ed adult softball, and it went nationwide, and his business exploded because he started a podcast about something as random as adult softball. So I say that to don't overthink it, find something you like to do, share it with people, and you'll grow.
That's awesome. That's really great feedback. So as long as, I mean, we could probably talk about these topics all day, given your wealth of knowledge, but I think we want to move on to our audience Q&A, and we've gotten a couple of questions. If you're open to answering some for us,
Of course,
Bill.
love to. Yeah.
The first question is really around, in your career, what are the top 2 or 3 pieces of advice that have stuck with you the most from a personal branding perspective?
That's a great question. A couple of them I've already shared, but I will reiterate. One is trust. We talk about that know, like, and trust scenario. Almost every marketing talk I've ever heard at some point mentions know, like, and trust. And I want to challenge you to replace trust with relevance. You will notice people and hear about topics and learn things and start recognizing people because what they're talking about is relevant to you. And sometimes it has nothing to do with the quality or of their advice or of the content or whatever. It just happens to be in your ecosystem. So I want to challenge people, focus on what is relevant to your audience as much about how to build trust. The other thing is I guess we've already said too, be consistent and persistent over time. Our top producer at our company is Denise Donahue. She's more than a $200 million a year, production producer. She'll probably do 800 or 900 transactions, has a big team. And she was sharing with our company today, and she puts out these tips for realtors every Friday in a closed Facebook group. And she's like, you may have to consistently share content, either text or email or touch, for a year and a half, 2 years before they even potentially reach out. And I think so many people, we have this microwave society that if it doesn't happen in a few weeks or a few months, it's not working. And it's just that you haven't done it long enough. You have to work at this over and over and over. And even with me, it was a good year and 50 or 60 episodes before I really started seeing almost a year and a half, any tangible results of people recognizing me or knew of my podcast or had any business lift. And it was something I spent a lot of time on for that year and a half. So don't be afraid to just stick with it, and the results will come.
That's great. Thank you for that. And that actually dovetails nicely into the next question, is that how do you advise LOs to build their personal brand within the confines of the company they work for?
That's a great question. So in that, the first thing I would say is you need to be very open and honest about what it is you're wanting to do and how you're wanting to do it. Talk with your direct manager, talk with a regional or national sales manager, however your company's structured, and tell them, hey, this is what I want to do and why. Here's who I'm trying to reach. Here's this message and value I want to provide. Here's the medium. Here's the importance of it. In that instance, I can't see a reasonable progressive company at all saying absolutely not, you can't do that. And I would challenge you that if I have heard of either smaller companies or potentially banks or things like that are like, absolutely not, you can't be on social media at all. I don't know the reasons behind that, but I would challenge you in today's day and age, especially if you're a mortgage originator and you're wanting to have any type of success, I would highly recommend you looking at that situation, deciding if that's the right company for you, for the type of business that you're wanting to build. I'm not advocating people quit companies, but I am saying there's a lot of really, really good companies that are embracing this type of doing business. And when you talk about millennials, them driving, I think they're 50 some odd % of the mortgage market right now of closed transactions. that generation is the most socially minded generation in history. That's why we have indie cosmetics and craft beer and, all of the resurgence of these small independent companies. And part of that is because social media is that great equalizer. They like the story. They want the cause. That's how we're doing business in today's day and age. And you got to be with a company that's going to participate in that. Most will, as long as you're upfront about what you're wanting to do.
Got it. Yep. I think that makes a lot of sense. So just to kind of tie this up nicely, we know that building a brand is not necessarily easy, but it's absolutely doable. So for the folks that are probably sitting here thinking, okay, this all sounds great. What the heck do I do next? What are the top, if you had to say, these are the first 3 things you should do to get started today, what would those be?
I mean, the first thing I would say is you need to be sharing content every day. And I know that I said earlier, focus on one platform and one type of content. If you're wanting to really go deep with a podcast or video, then that's accurate. But if you want to get started and you want to get started fast, I would be sharing content to Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube almost daily. That's something that I would be finding. And even if it's not your own content, you can be sharing other people's. And especially with mortgage companies, I say you can split up into 2 categories. One is company provided content that's about your business. You can also document your business. The rest, document your life, document your hobbies, create some other. Yesterday was the first day of fall. Okay, well, you could have said, hey, what are some things that you guys are looking forward to doing in the next couple of months as fall really gets in swing? Hashtag first day of fall. People will respond to that. People engage with that kind of stuff. Well, that's what you want, because then the next post, the algorithm's like, hey, the last post they did, they really got out there. So you need to be posting consistently a lot. Second thing I would be doing is making sure that you're using the engagement to create conversations. If someone comments, comment back. If you go into a Facebook group, and it's something I would recommend you do, go help answer questions. It doesn't have to be real estate related. Go find moms groups, dad groups, find a hobby, go in there and answer questions. People like, oh, hey, who is that? Oh, they're a mortgage professional, they're a real estate professional. And that will create conversations. And focus on making as many contacts and relationships as you can. And the third is I would build your database. And that's probably the most important thing. Every person you meet, every person you connect with, every person that you have any interaction with, I would be connecting with them, learning more about them, and putting them in a database.
Amazing. That's awesome. That's very, very, very helpful. Based on that, so those all sound great. When do you take a do-it-yourself approach versus finding an expert to support you?
As far as content creation?
Yeah, or just your general branding strategy.
That's a great question. I think it's going to be a little bit different for everybody. I post and control all of my social media accounts. It doesn't mean I created all the pieces of content myself, but for me, because it's a personal brand, because I'm still tied to production, whether I'm recruiting or whether I'm working with realtors and clients, I need to be the one that's sharing that content in a way that I feel like I can engage with other people. From the content creation side of it, I also used to do every part of that because I wanted to understand my business. I wanted to understand what it takes to do all this stuff. And I got to a point to where I could outsource some of it. And I'm a big advocate for outsourcing things and paying for things that are not our area of expertise, right? So when people want to find, and this happens a lot in mortgage and real estate, they want to find a company to post on social media for them. Well, I am a absolute opponent to that. That is not a good idea, in my opinion. You have to realize, why are you using social media? You're using social media to reach people that you would not have normally reached going to your network meetings or your chamber of commerce meetings or realtor meetings or whatever. You use social media to reach people. That is a communication platform. Again, just like personal brand is about the person, social media is about being social, not about the media. It's not for advertising. Okay. So I don't mind people having someone else help create their videos or their graphics or whatever else, but you need to be the one that's communicating to your audience, because that's what you do as a mortgage or real estate professional. You are a communicator. You are the person who is going to be developing a relationship with them. So when to do that, that's different for everybody, but I would recommend in and out at least conceptually what's happening in your business, and then find places where someone else has more talent or you can replace yourself. But if you think it's a smart idea to say, oh, I'm having someone else do all of it, I don't even get on social, I got all kinds of stuff going on, people brag about that and they're missing the point. They're missing why you should be on there in the first place.
Yep. Yep. No, that makes sense. And then you're risking authenticity, right?
Absolutely. And
Authentic.
people
So,
feel that.
yeah, for sure. Well, we are at time. We want to respect your busy day, Phil. So grateful for the time today and you sharing your expertise with all of us. So, so thank you very much. And
well, thank you for having me.
Yes, and for everyone else, thanks for your time today as well.